Advance or die. That is the order being issued to Russian soldiers by commanders under intense pressure to deliver results to the Kremlin, even as the army around them disintegrates. Putin has lost the war he chose to start. Something is consuming Russia's military from within. And the most damaging part of this story is that Russia itself bears as much responsibility as anyone for the destruction of nearly 1.3 million of its own soldiers. Putin is cornered. The sacrifice has accomplished nothing, and the measures he is now taking to sustain a war already lost will leave lasting damage on his entire country. The intercepted call, a window into Russia's military reality. The pressure tearing through Russia's military structure was captured in stark terms in a phone call intercepted and published by Ukraine's military intelligence, known as HWAR, on February 15th. What do you mean there's plus there? What the fucking are you doing? Have you completely lost your minds? What the fucking do you mean refusal? Move forward, fucking go! A Russian commander shouts at his troops. Two things stand out immediately. The first is the word refusal. It is increasingly evident that Russian soldiers are declining to advance into Ukrainian kill zones, and the reasons for that terror will become clear shortly. The second is perhaps more telling. The commander is not listening. There is no tactical adjustment, no controlled withdrawal to reassess and improve the assault's odds of success. Russia's only available response to battlefield resistance is to push forward regardless of consequence. The desperation driving this dynamic is made explicit by what the commander says next. Faster, fucker. I need to file the fucking report. This is not military leadership. It is bureaucratic self-preservation exercised over human lives. The commander's overriding concern is not how many soldiers survive the assault. It is that the soldiers moved forward, even marginally, so that he can report upward that ground was gained. As HUR noted on Telegram, the intercepted call represents clear evidence of the extremely low morale and psychological state of Russian units. Putin's soldiers do not want to fight. They are being coerced into assaults by commanders whose careers depend on reporting forward movement, not on keeping their men alive. The result is an army filled with soldiers whose morale has collapsed because they have no clear understanding of what they are dying for. Those who refuse are met with fury. You fucking refusers! You fucking monkeys! Now you'll go together with them and charge in there, the commander screams. The translation is simple. Go and die so a report can be filed. How pressure destroyed Russia's military. This is the war Putin built, and it explains precisely why Russia has already lost it. Any coherent strategy vanished long ago. What remains is the meat assault, a barbaric method of feeding soldiers into kill zones in the hope that the next wave will be the one that exhausts Ukraine's ammunition or depletes its drones. This strategy is visible in its most concentrated form at Pokrovsk, a city that was supposed to fall to Russia's 2025 summer offensive and still has not been fully captured, producing more than 6 months of brutal fighting that Putin never anticipated. Colonel Vladimir Putin, head of communications for the 7th Rapid Response Corps of Ukraine's air assault forces, spoke to this on February 7th. Overall, on the Pokrovsk axis, the enemy is losing about 6,000 personnel per month. These are enormous numbers, effectively 2 full-strength brigades. The loss ratio is in our favor, roughly 1-6, but what is important is that the Russians are also losing in tempo. For every 1 killed, they have about 1.3 wounded. For every 100 killed, 130 wounded. This is a horrific ratio. Horrific is the right word, and what is driving this carnage is not primarily Ukraine, though Ukraine is exploiting the situation with devastating effectiveness. The real engine of destruction is the relentless demand from the Kremlin that the army advances, regardless of cost. That demand has filtered down through every layer of command, producing the coercion we hear in the intercepted call, the brutality documented in the ranks, and ultimately, the collapse of the army from the inside. What Russia is doing to its own soldiers. A December 31st report by the New York Times described Russia's army as having developed what it called an insatiable demand for men. The machine Putin constructed runs on brutality and coercion, the outlet reported, to the extent that gravely ill and wounded soldiers are being returned to frontline duty rather than removed from the fighting. Families across Russia live in fear for husbands and sons, and that fear has manifested in formal complaints, including one petition signed by over 1,500 Russians accusing the military of concealing widespread wrongdoing from the public. That wrongdoing extends beyond commanders screaming soldiers into kill zones. An October report by the Moscow Times revealed that at least 100 Russian officers have executed their own subordinates in Ukraine. Some of those same officers demanded their soldiers' bank card details and PIN numbers, ostensibly to forward funds to soldiers' families. The real motive is transparent. Soldiers' accounts are loaded with the enlistment bonuses paid for signing up to Putin's war. A PIN number is all a corrupt officer needs to drain that money. What awaits Russian soldiers in the kill zones? To understand why soldiers are refusing to advance, it is necessary to understand what a Ukrainian kill zone actually contains. United 24 media has documented this in detail. The terrain itself is engineered as a death trap. Infantry advancing on foot, which is how Russian soldiers are most commonly sent forward, first encounter Plutanka, a Ukrainian term for the dense networks of thin, barbed wire that snag clothing and boots, slowing movement to a crawl. Massive barbed wire spools add further obstacles, and Ukrainian fighters are positioned in tunnels throughout these zones, waiting in ambush or operating drones. Those Russian units fortunate enough to have armored support still face minefields, anti-tank ditches, and dragon's teeth barriers designed to halt vehicles and detonate mines under tracks. And then there are the drones, hundreds of them. Reconnaissance drones guide Ukrainian operators to their targets. FPV drones armed with explosive payloads close in on isolated soldiers and immobilized vehicles. Death is not a possibility in these zones. For the vast majority who enter, it is a near certainty. Ukraine designs these spaces specifically to channel Russian forces into pre-positioned artillery and drone ambushes. As the National Interest noted in a January 25th article, these kill zones could well be what saves Ukraine. But their effectiveness depends heavily on Putin continuing to drive his soldiers into them. No alternative Russian tactics have emerged. Commanders are told to take ground, threatened with punishment if they fail, and left with no other options, which is exactly what produced the situation HUR captured on February 15th. The scale of the sacrifice. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, 1,254,450 Russian soldiers had been killed, wounded, captured, or gone missing between the start of Putin's invasion and February 16th. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte has put Russia's current daily casualty rate at approximately 1,000 soldiers. At that pace, Russia will reach 1.3 million total casualties within roughly 45 to 46 days, all sacrificed in a war that Russia has already lost. Secret mass mobilization, Putin's desperate answer. Putin's response to the manpower crisis his pressure created is now being exposed. In a February 13th report for The Telegraph, British military expert Hamish de Bretton-Gordon revealed that Russia is running out of volunteers. The prisoner recruitment pipeline, which had delivered 180,000 convicts to the front by January 2025, according to the Kyiv Independent, is drying up as prison populations thin. Third country recruitment has similarly failed to fill the gap. None of these sources comes close to replacing what de Bretton-Gordon estimates as 35,000 Russian casualties every single month. Mobilization is Putin's solution. But after 4 years of grinding war that has exhausted the Russian population, there has been no public announcement, no patriotic call to arms. the mobilization is being carried out covertly. According to well-informed contacts of mine in the intelligence community, Putin now appears to be carrying out mobilization by stealth. DeBreton Gordon explains. The usual biannual conscription cycles, historically around 130,000 per intake, have been replaced with a rolling draft system designed to obscure the sheer numbers of men being called up. DeBreton Gordon states that this covert mobilization is larger in scale than the partial mobilization Putin ordered publicly in September 2022. It involves forcing reservists, personnel who should be handling rear area duties and infrastructure protection, directly onto frontline positions. The Institute for the Study of War had flagged this trajectory back in October, reporting that the Kremlin was preparing to push reservists forward in exactly this kind of rolling mobilization approach. At the time, ISW noted that Russia's financial incentive model, paying soldiers to enlist, was producing diminishing returns. Money is no longer sufficient. Coercion has taken its place. Putin is keeping this secret for obvious reasons. The Atlantic Council notes that the partial September 2022 mobilization, far smaller than what is reportedly underway now, was already deeply unpopular inside Russia. Going public with the current mobilization would be a direct admission that the Kremlin's war is failing and that Russia cannot sustain it voluntarily. Why mobilization cannot save Russia? Former HUR director and current head of the Office of the President of Ukraine, Kirilo Budanov, addressed this dynamic in September. When, in 2022, they conducted the mobilization, they immediately tried to shut it down quickly because of public backlash. But can that stop Russia? No, it won't stop it. Open rebellion is unlikely. But what Putin is doing is something more slowly destructive than a revolt. He is dismantling Russia from the inside to sustain a war he cannot win. As analyst Ihor Petrenko writes for The Gaze, mobilization ruptures the social contract between Putin and the Russian population. What was presented as a distant special military operation is becoming an intimate national catastrophe for millions of families watching loved ones disappear into a front they were never supposed to reach. The economic and demographic catastrophe. Russia faces a labor crisis of historic proportions. Approximately 1.3 million casualties represent at least 2% of Russia's entire workforce, Petrenko explains. A shock felt across every industry not directly tied to the war. Putin's war economy is an insatiable system consuming every available able-bodied man. Those not fighting are working in weapons factories. Every other sector of the Russian economy has been starved of human capital as a result. Russia's birth rate currently sits at 1.4 children per woman, well below the 2.1 average that Forbes identifies as necessary for stable population replacement. As casualties continue accumulating, Russia's population is declining at a pace that compounds with each passing month. The combination of wartime economic distortion and demographic collapse is generating the labor shortage that will ultimately cripple Russia's economy. RBC Ukraine reports that Russia currently has a labor gap of 2.3 million people, a figure that even its traditional labor sources in Central Asia cannot fill. The result is a dramatic increase in recruitment from more distant countries. In 2025, nearly 72,000 Indian citizens obtained Russian work visas, compared to just 5,000 in 2021, the year before the invasion. According to the Economic Times, Russia is also actively recruiting from Sri Lanka in an attempt to plug the gap. The long-term picture this creates is stark. Even in a scenario where Russia somehow prevails after years or decades of continued fighting, it will emerge with millions of men dead, a birth rate crisis that cannot be quickly reversed, and an economy more structurally dependent on foreign labor than at any point in its history. The Russia that fought this war will not be the Russia that exists afterward. It is losing its demographic identity alongside its soldiers. And still, the pressure will intensify. Putin's failed war has collapsed inward, and what remains is a country in sustained, self-inflicted crisis. Putin's invasion was always an act of profound miscalculation. What it actually achieved was exposing how fragile Russia truly is. Economic strain, separatist pressures, and evaporating geopolitical influence are converging on a state that may be permanently broken by the choices of one man. More on Russia's internal collapse, the economic fractures, the separatist tensions, and the vanishing influence is available in our separate coverage. Subscribe to stay across everything as this story continues to develop.